Good morning, everyone. It is June 20th, and I want to focus on one specific event that took place in the last 24 hours, but it is very significant and likely helps turn the tide to more successes for Ukraine across much of the front line, or at least much of the front line in the southern region, the Zaporizhia, Kherson, as well as Western Donetsk frontline area, largely where much of the mass movements of the counteroffensive are taking place. So when you look at this map, I want to set the stage before I talk about this strike that took place in Rakova or Rykova. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but when you look at logistics across this front line, there's really only 2 points of entry that Russia has. You have coming from Crimea, because Russia is a rail-based logistics system. So you come from Crimea, or you come from the east towards the west into Ukraine. Much of these two routes feed the entire front line, and Russia is very much a rail-based logistics system. They don't use a lot of trucks, and obviously aircraft becomes kind of a problematic here because of anti-aircraft tools. Well, zooming in on the town of Rakova here, you can see what is one of their logistics hubs. So there's a rail line that runs through this area and goes all the way down to the south. So Rakova, which is right here, for those of you that didn't see it, but that is a major ammunition depot for Russia. Now you ask, why is this small town an ammunition depot? Well, problem is Russia or Ukraine a while back, originally the depots were in Crimea. Well, Ukraine a while back and earlier in the war destroyed the rail bridging, that infrastructure that crossed these waterways in 2 points, making it so conducting logistics directly from Crimea very difficult. So what did Russia do? They moved their logistics hub to, and I'm going to say this wrong, Novorossiysk, right here. And that is where they conducted much of their logistics from for a while. Well, as you can see, and I'm going to zoom in on this region right here before I delete that. As you can see, this area right here, this blue hash mark, means that there's partisan activity, meaning when you have blue hash marks, it means this town, the Russians are currently fighting against resistance fighters, Ukrainian resistance fighters. So that it made holding ammunitions in mass here very dangerous for the Russians, because it can be targets of opportunity for these Ukrainian resistance fighters. So what did Russia do? They moved their ammunition depot a little down the rail line, and you can see this rail line runs right here. So they moved it down the rail line and put it in the town of Rakova right there. That is where it's been since the beginning of the war. Why is this significant? Well, the Ukrainians used a Storm Shadow cruise missile to destroy not only the railway station, but the warehouse complex housing thousands upon thousands of tons of Russian ammunition. Now you have to understand why this is significant, because, as I said earlier, the Ukrainians destroyed the rail access to this location. The only thing left is the road truck access. The rail access is no longer available. They blew up the bridging for the rail access, the Ukrainians did. And so, because of that, much of the logistics support from this hub that supports the front line was held in this small town, and it's called a hub and spoke. They brought it, and then they went out and delivered it across the front line here. They had massive stockpiles, and I mean thousands upon thousands of tons of ammunition. When Ukraine struck it, it absolutely vaporized everything on the ground, and I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. So here's the before picture. This is the whole facility, and I want to point you to these teeny little things down here. You see where my mouse is? Those are train cars. These are houses. These little tiny buildings are houses or small office buildings. This is a massive massive warehousing system, massive ammunitions depot. All of these warehousing facilities held ammunition. Let me show you the after. June 19th. The foundations are gone. This whole area was vaporized, and unfortunately it looks like there was collateral damage in the surrounding area. But when you have this much ammunition as a target, it is a massive target of opportunity for the Ukrainians. Also housed here, this is where Russia had one of its units of special forces, and the tally so far is at least 52 soldiers in the Russian special forces who were based in this complex have died. So let me talk about why this is a logistics nightmare of the first order for Russia. So as I said, Ukraine destroyed 2 of the rail bridges feeding into this town. They destroyed the rail bridge in this region right here, and they destroyed it further up the line here, as well as they've also destroyed over here too. But that wasn't mentioned earlier. The only way they can get supplies here is by road or coming in from. They'll either get it by road through here, not rail, or by coming through across the entire front of the entire battlefield, essentially, in the Zaporizhia region. That's the only way they can get that. So because of that was the hub for resupplying long-term ammunition needs of their artillery on the front line, we're talking about maybe a week to 10 days of ammunition that Russia has lost. That means 1/4 of their ammunition fire rate is going to drop immediately. Over the next few days, we're going to see that fire rate drop to half, and then by probably 10 days to 2 weeks from now, they're going to have to drop it by 3/4. And what this does is it creates an opportunity for Ukraine, because when you zoom in on the front line here, I'll tell you how the Russians are operating. The Russians had their frontline troops in a first defensive position, then they had a second defensive position and a third defensive position. How the Russians have been operating is back behind this third line of defenses. The artillery would conduct fires to destroy Ukraine, and this would largely cover the horrific tactics, and I'll talk about this in another video, the tactics of the Russians in this trench warfare system. So because of this, the Russian artillery is going to be significantly depleted in their capability. There's just no way to quickly return to replenish tens of thousands of tons of ammunition. And as you saw, that whole area was vaporized. So what's happening is much of these Russian fighters who have been protected by masses of artillery are going to lose that, at least to a point where half the barrages are going to go away. This is going to create opportunities for Ukraine to start conducting bigger pushes, and this was part of their whole plan. What we're going to see is these third line defenses won't be filled because the capability of artillery to defend them is going to be gone, so the Russians are going to die a little bit more on their first and second lines of defense. We're going to see equipment losses by Russia. We're going to see potentially a bigger push, and we're going to see some scrambling by the Russian forces to try to resupply this region, because they know full well that the Ukrainian counteroffensive that is taking place along axis here and here. Well, when you take out the logistics capability, which was coming from down here, this is where it roughly was down here, resupplying this area, now it strains this supply route to try to supply not only this line, but also move on to this line. That's additional distance, that's additional strain to try and conduct logistics, because this area over here is no longer available. And the Ukrainians are going to use that to their advantage, and it's going to be significant. So this strike on this warehousing complex for ammunition was very, very significant for Ukraine, and we'll see that play out in the next few weeks.